Greetings everyone, I'm Detective STARBORN, and I'm glad to see you on my YouTube channel. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on new and interesting videos. Thank you and enjoy watching. A student left work and disappeared right in the middle of a phone conversation under very strange circumstances. Police officers began their search for her, reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance footage and trying to find any leads. Soon, they managed to discover something truly terrifying in these frames, but the girl's fate remained unknown for several months. In the end, the investigators still got to the truth, and the outcome of this case caused mass indignation and outrage. Dru Sjodin was born on September 26, 1981, in the small town of Pequot Lakes, Minnesota. From early childhood, Dru was very active and goal-oriented. She loved drawing and creating various crafts, and also played basketball, volleyball, and golf. In addition, she participated in various charitable events and strived to help everyone who needed it. Thanks to all this, she had a lot of friends, and in high school she won the title of prom queen. After finishing school, Dru enrolled at the University of North Dakota, majoring in fine arts. Despite it being a 3-hour drive from her hometown, the girl tried to visit her parents as often as possible. At the same time, she managed to study with excellent grades, work in 2 places, and take an active part in university life, including continuing to engage in charity work. Dru also signed up for a special university program that allowed her to travel regularly, and the girl was looking forward to the opportunity to go to Australia. While studying at the university, Dru began dating a guy named Chris, and the couple made plans for a future together. On November 22, 2003, when she was 22, Dru, as usual, went to her day shift at the clothing store where she worked part-time on weekends. After that, the girl was supposed to go to the bar where she worked as a waitress for the evening shift. After finishing her first job, Dru went to the store next door, bought a handbag, and headed for the parking lot. On the way, she called her boyfriend, and the couple talked for about 4 minutes. Then something strange happened. In the middle of the conversation, Dru suddenly fell silent, then said, "Oh God, okay," and hung up. At first, Chris didn't think much of it. The guy thought that the girl's connection could have been cut off when she entered the parking lot, or her phone ran out of battery. 3 hours later, he received a call from Dru, but when Chris picked up the phone, there was silence. He only heard some noise like wind, as well as something like the sound of buttons being pressed on the phone. He said the girl's name several times, but there was no response. The guy tried to call her back, but Dru never answered. This time he began to worry and decided to call her roommate. She said that she hadn't talked to her all day, but added that the girl was probably just busy at work and he shouldn't worry. However, soon after this conversation, the roommate received a call from Dru's boss at the bar where she was supposed to work the evening shift. To her surprise, he said that Dru hadn't shown up for work and hadn't even notified anyone about it. This was very uncharacteristic of her, because Dru always took her responsibilities very seriously. Moreover, the roommate remembered the conversation with her boyfriend and began to worry that something bad might have happened to her friend. The girl began calling local hospitals, but no one resembling Dru had been admitted to any of them. By then, it was already late evening, and the friend decided to go to the police. The girl told them that Dru had missed her work shift and hadn't returned home. She also shared information about the strange calls between her and her boyfriend. However, the police were in no hurry to start searching. They felt that all of the above wasn't compelling enough evidence to believe that something bad could have happened to the girl. Besides, she was 22 years old, and the police advised waiting some more time before raising the alarm. Despite this, the friend didn't follow their advice and turned to the university police where Dru was studying. There, like in many educational institutions in the USA, there was a separate police station, and the officers immediately began working on the case. They went to the shopping center where the girl worked, since that was the last place she had contacted anyone she knew. Entering the parking lot, the police saw her car. It was still parked in her usual spot, even though Dru's shift had ended many hours ago. Another suspicious point was that the car doors were not locked. Inside the car, there were no signs of struggle or other evidence that something could have happened to Dru. However, soon, the police saw a case from a small pocket knife on the floor next to the car, and this find caused them serious concern. They contacted the city police, and they joined the investigation. The officers requested footage from the parking lot cameras, but here they encountered a problem. The place where Dru's car was parked did not fall within the view of any of the cameras. As a result, the police began viewing recordings from all the cameras in the shopping center, hoping to recreate the chronology of events before her disappearance. Given the huge area of the building, they had to watch hundreds of hours of footage, which took a considerable amount of time. At the same time, the news of Dru's disappearance spread through her university, and the administration quickly organized a search operation. They involved hundreds of students, divided them into groups, and sent them to inspect the streets, wooded areas, the banks of the local river, and other remote places. The administration also asked all students to share any information that could shed light on the girl's disappearance. Meanwhile, police received data on Dru's phone activity, which confirmed her boyfriend's story. But when they studied the information about her phone's location, they were in for a rather strange discovery. According to cell tower data, the last time Dru called her boyfriend was from a neighboring town, about 30 minutes drive from the shopping center. Comparing the time, investigators concluded that during this call, Chris heard some noise like wind and the sounds of buttons being pressed. Given that her car remained in the parking lot, the girl clearly couldn't have covered this distance on her own, and the police began to think that she might have been kidnapped. Despite this, in the next few days, they still couldn't find a single lead. Officers continued to view all the cameras from the shopping center, and search groups combed the city in search of any clues. This went on for 2 days until the police finally received their first serious lead. Officers from a small town called Crookston, which was located near the signal location of Dru's phone, found a black shoe on the riverbank. The police showed it to the girl's roommate, and she confirmed that Dru had the exact same shoes. This find further heightened the investigators' suspicions. If the girl had indeed been kidnapped, the available evidence indicated that she had been taken many tens of kilometers away from the city. They contacted colleagues from cities further in that direction and briefed them on the case, asking them to help with the search. Meanwhile, the police finally found footage from the cameras in the shopping center where Dru was present. They saw that after the end of her shift, the girl went to several stores. Apparently, she was buying Christmas gifts for her loved ones. These frames allowed them to find out what clothes Dru was wearing at the time of her disappearance, as well as confirm that she was wearing the same black shoes as those found near the river in another city. Having collected all the available video recordings where Dru was present, the investigators began to look for any suspicious people who could have been following the girl, or who simply appeared with her in the same frames more often than others. Soon they noticed one particular person. A middle-aged man with a cane, dressed all in black, attracted their attention with rather strange behavior. Based on the camera recordings, he repeatedly entered the grocery supermarket connected to the shopping center. At the same time, he never bought anything. Instead, it seemed to the police that the man was not even looking at the shelves with goods, but was watching other visitors, especially women. Soon, investigators found this person on other recordings outside the store. He was sitting on a bench and looking at passersby, but then something really suspicious happened. When a young girl who looked somewhat like Dru passed by him, he got up from the bench and followed her. In the next few hours, the police found several more similar cases on the recordings where the same man was walking behind other girls. The camera footage alone was not enough to establish the identity of this person, so the detectives decided to search the database of all men who lived in that city and had convictions for serious offenses. Having compiled a list of 60 names, they narrowed it down to 4, eliminating all unsuitable candidates. Among the remaining people, the police chose the one who most resembled the man from the shopping center. It was 50-year-old Alfonso Rodriguez. He had an impressive criminal history, as well as a rather difficult past. From childhood, Rodriguez had serious health problems, which caused him problems at school and in communicating with the opposite sex. For example, one of his legs was shorter than the other, so he was forced to use a cane for walking. As a result, Alfonso began taking banned substances, and at the age of 21, he was first caught by the police for attempting to assault an unfamiliar woman who offered to give him a ride home. When the man got into the car, he pulled out a knife and tried to attack her, but the victim managed to fight back. Later, he assaulted 2 other women a month apart. The court sentenced him to compulsory therapy, which lasted for 5 years, after which the man was released. In the same year, he was arrested again on suspicion of assault, but this time the prosecution could not find sufficient evidence to convict him. Soon after, Alfonso tried to kidnap another woman and inflicted stab wounds on her, for which he was arrested again. This time, the man was sentenced to 23 years in prison, and he was released on May 1st, 2003, 7 months before Dru's disappearance. It is noteworthy that Alfonso was released under the supervision of his relatives, although they themselves openly expressed doubts that he was ready to return to society. After his release, he lived with his mother in the city of Crookston, the same place where the police found Dru's shoe. Given all of the above, the detectives had almost no doubt that Alfonso had something to do with her disappearance. On the 4th day of the investigation, they brought the man in for questioning, and he admitted that he had indeed been in that shopping center. However, Alfonso insisted that he had nothing to do with the abduction and went there to watch a movie in the cinema located inside this building. The man gave them a specific movie, and the investigators went to check this information. To their surprise, they quickly established that such a movie was not shown not only in this cinema, but also in any others in this city. Realizing that Alfonso had lied to them, the police asked to inspect his car, and the man allowed them to do so without a warrant. Inside, they found a receipt from the store, according to which Alfonso had bought a pocket knife. Having studied this model, the detectives concluded that the knife case found near the car belonged to the same model. But that wasn't all. The knife itself was also in the car. It was lying in a bottle filled with cleaning agent. When Alfonso's car was handed over to forensic experts, they found traces of wiped blood there, and the experts were able to extract a DNA sample from it. Comparing it with the DNA from Dru's toothbrush, they got a complete match. In addition to all this, a woman's shoe and another knife, which was not filled with cleaning agent, were found in the car. After conducting an analysis, experts found traces of blood on it, which also matched Dru's DNA. On December 10th, when all this evidence was gathered together, Alfonso was arrested on charges of kidnapping and possible murder. But despite the fact that his guilt seemed almost obvious to the detectives, they still didn't know what had happened to the missing girl. Alfonso himself refused to give a confession, so the police concentrated all their efforts on the search. They turned to the public for help, attracted even more volunteers, and focused on Crookston and its surroundings. Despite all their efforts, the search yielded no results for long months. The situation was complicated by the fact that quite heavy snowfalls continued throughout the winter, and the search teams simply could not reach hard-to-access places. In early March of the following year, 3 months after the girl's disappearance, preparations began for the trial of Alfonso, and he pleaded not guilty before the judge. No one believed that Dru was still alive, but with the available set of evidence, the prosecution could still get a conviction. Meanwhile, the police continued their search. With the beginning of spring, the snow began to melt, which made it easier for them to reach hard-to-access areas like forests and fields. This continued until April 17th, until the investigators finally received sad but expected news. Dru's body was found several kilometers west of Crookston, in the water of the local river. In winter, this place was covered with ice and snow, so the search teams had virtually no chance to find her earlier. But as soon as the snow finally melted, it was noticed quickly enough. Medical experts found abrasions, traces of stab wounds, and signs of assault on her body. As for the cause of death, they could not come to an exact conclusion. In addition to stab wounds, experts also found traces of strangulation. But there was a third option, according to which the victim died from the cold after the criminal left her in this place. The experts also established that she died approximately 3 hours after the abduction. Now that the police had found the victim's body, the prosecution had only one task left: to achieve a just punishment for the killer. Due to the fact that the place of abduction was in North Dakota and the murder itself took place in neighboring Minnesota, the charges in this case were of a federal nature. This meant that Alfonso could be sentenced to death, even though this type of punishment was prohibited in both states. Despite this, the governor of Minnesota spoke out in support of such a sentence, although there were quite a large number of people in this state who were against the death penalty. As for North Dakota, this case became the first in 100 years in which a resident of the state faced the death penalty. The trial began in the summer of 2006, and Alfonso continued to insist on his innocence. However, with such evidence, he simply had no chance of avoiding punishment, and on February 8, 2007, he was sentenced to death. As in all other cases with this sentence, the wait for execution dragged on for many years, which Alfonso spent in prison. Meanwhile, Dru's relatives took part in the development of a law that implied the creation of a national registry of criminals convicted of violent crimes. In the summer of 2007, this law, named in memory of Dru, was signed by the president and came into force. It implied the creation of a website where one could find out the address and other information about all criminals convicted under articles related to violence. The girl's parents also repeatedly said that the authorities should not have initially released Alfonso. Later, his attending physician, who was engaged in the man's compulsory rehabilitation, told reporters that he was against Alfonso's release and recommended transferring him from the clinic to prison. But despite this, the criminal was still released back into society. Unfortunately, for Dru's relatives, the sentencing did not become the endpoint in this case. In 2011, Alfonso's lawyers tried to challenge the court's decision, insisting that their client had developmental problems. Their attempts led nowhere, but 10 years later, in 2021, a new appeal was more successful. The judge agreed that Rodriguez did indeed have developmental problems, and during the first trial, the lawyers were not given the opportunity to present sufficient evidence of this fact. The judge also noted his difficult childhood and serious health problems. In addition, the criminal's lawyers insisted that the medical expert who testified at the trial exaggerated the injuries, and in fact, everything was not so bad. As a result, the judge overturned the death sentence and appointed a new trial, the results of which in March 2023 Alfonso received a life sentence. With all this, back in 2013, he confessed to his cellmates when he gave an interview from death row. But now he will have to spend the rest of his life behind bars, not worrying that one day he might be executed. In memory of Dru, her university established a separate scholarship, which is still in effect today. In addition, the girl's relatives opened a memorial garden in her hometown, and in the near future, the same kind of place is planned to be created on the territory of her university campus. Thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I look forward to your comments on this situation. That was Detective STARBORN. See you soon.